Welcome to Hope in the Mourning, turning tragedies and tears into testimonies of hope.
For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful. I know that full well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in the secret place. When I was woven together in the depths of the earth, your eyes saw my unformed substance. And all the days ordained for me were written in your book before one of them came to be. These poetic words from Psalm 139 speak to the care and attention the Lord takes with the unborn. All life is created in the image of God, and all loss of life is worthy of weeping. Joining us today to talk about misunderstandings in miscarriage and how we can minister to one another is Obstetrician Dr. Nicholas Schoenbachler. Thank you for joining us today, Nick.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
So I wanted to start with one of the questions that, as someone that's had multiple miscarriages, I think is kind of a misunderstanding, which is if you can break down for us the basics of what a chemical pregnancy is in layman's terms.
Yeah, sure. When I hear the term chemical pregnancy, usually someone's referring to a pregnancy that was very early, where if you had an ultrasound, you wouldn't see anything. So, but a pregnancy test would have been positive. And then the miscarriage that follows, so maybe a week after when someone would have normally expected to have their cycle, then usually that would have been referred to as a chemical pregnancy.
Okay.
So very, very early miscarriage.
Yeah. And in your Christian perspective, is that a legitimate loss?
Yeah, I would absolutely say so. From a Christian biblical worldview, we would hold that life begins at conception. So at the point of fertilization, we would say that's a life. That's a human life. And so even if that pregnancy ends in a few days, a few hours, a few weeks, then we would hold it as Christians. We would say that absolutely that's a legitimate pregnancy, certainly.
Yeah. Did you realize when you decided to become an obstetrician, did you realize the level of counseling that you would be taking on with that role?
I didn't think, looking back, I don't think I realized how frequent that would occur. When you think about what studies show as far as the number or the percentage of miscarriages, it's probably 10 up to 15% of pregnancies that end in a miscarriage. And so on a day-to-day basis, in practice, you see it more commonly than you would have maybe anticipated it early in my training as a medical student or something.
Yeah.
And so, and then that experience, I certainly didn't have any knowledge of what that would look like day to day, and having that encounter with families early on.
Yeah.
And so,
So I know a lot of your patients, you may have some that are believers and some that are unbelievers. And so how do you prepare for your job, knowing that you're going into your day-to-day work, celebrating people's highest highs, giving birth to healthy babies, and their lowest lows, expecting a healthy baby and that not being the outcome? How do you prepare for that?
I think just zooming out, I feel like all of my days, whether I'm in the office or just spending time with my family, they begin the same, and with an aim of just a communion with God. And so spending time in His Word, reading the Scriptures, spending time in prayer, and then if focusing my heart and mind towards heading to the office or heading to the hospital, then I'm really always just I try to be mindful to ask the Lord for His help, and recognizing we're all dependent on Him for all things pertaining to life and godliness and His grace. And so I think just asking the Lord to help me prepare me for my day. Like the Lord knows even that past, like He knows all of my day. So He knows the encounters I'll have, the situations that patients will be involved in. And so I always want to be approach those situations, not just to clinically, but I want to be kind and loving in the situation that someone's going through.
Yeah.
So the Word of God and prayer would be the foundation of preparing every day, certainly.
Yeah. I mean, I think that is so important, to be able to have a doctor that not only prepares scripturally, but even just from a medical standpoint, being able to have somebody that has an empathetic standpoint, because, oftentimes in our work, when something can kind of become maybe a little bit more commonplace because you're dealing with it day in and day out. But, even for my husband and I, we can speak from personal experience that you were very empathetic toward us when we went through that situation. And it makes a big difference because you feel like you're seen and you're heard, and your situation is not just another case. It's another life is what that is. And what would you say are some scriptures that you would advise people to cling to, especially believers? What can they cling to when they're facing a miscarriage?
Yeah, I think that I would always think about just the foundation of what I hold to before that event occurs in someone's life. Like, what do I know about? And you read Psalm 139, which I think is a verse for everyone to store away in their heart and minds. That God knew all of my days before there was one. That He ordered them. He knows the end from the beginning. So this realization that God is sovereign over all of life. We see that in Genesis. God breathes life into Adam. He is the giver of life. You see that with Jacob and Rachel, that He opens the womb. He's the one who closes the womb. And so in His providence, then He orders a pregnancy and to whatever end that He has designed it for. And so I think that's the most important foundation when I can trust, and that I can believe and hope in that is true for all of life. Yeah. Every trial, every situation, but especially in pregnancy as well. But then I also think about familiar passages like Romans 8:28, that he's using all things for our good, that we might be conformed to the image of His Son. And so even in the despair of a loss of pregnancy, that for the Christian, He's using that in His mysterious ways for my good.
Yeah.
And that it's in producing Christ likeness in my life. Another passage I think about is in 2 Corinthians 4, where Paul says this. What he says is, and I would caution someone if they're going to encourage someone to share this verse, because it can come off as callous. But when he says, this light momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory beyond all comparison, as we look not to things that are seen, but to things that are unseen. And so that doesn't, Paul's not saying there is that your trial is small, or that the suffering is light in that sense, but when I compare my situation to glory being in the presence of God, with Him forever and all eternity, then compared to that, then things are light. So I think just those would be several verses that come to my mind, just to have deep and some stored up in someone's mind and heart that they can just rest on. It doesn't make the grief less. It doesn't make the mourning less, but I can hope in God and what He has said.
Yeah. One of the passages that we clung to the most in our miscarriages was Psalm 139. And one of the things I love about it is oftentimes we think, oh, their life was cut short. But in reality, they lived the fullness of their days. It just was that was how many days the Lord ordained for them. And it doesn't mean that their life didn't have a purpose, even with it being such a short life. But also going back to the passage in 2 Corinthians that you mentioned, we believe that our babies are with the Lord. And
Mhm.
so what a beautiful thing that the Lord has secured those
Yeah.
children for us. And I think that that is such a encouraging thing for people that have gone through
Mhm.
miscarriage. And having been in this practice now for, was it about 10 years?
I've been counting training as well. Will be 10 years in
Okay.
August, so 6
So
years out of training.
what would you say are some ways that you have seen husbands encourage their wives
Yeah.
along the way?
Yeah, I think one, most importantly, we can all pray for our spouses more, and pray for our wives more. I think especially in that a husband should pray for his wife, that he goes before the Lord to bring her name to the Lord's remembrance, um, and to do that frequent and often. Um, I think about my own self as a husband, and probably all men feel this way, that we, by nature, when something seems to be off, we just want to fix it.
Yeah.
So you could insert any situation you're working through as a family or anything around the home. We just want to fix it. And
Yeah.
so when there's even a loss, it's like, well, there's grief, there's something going on, let's just make it better.
Yeah.
And so sometimes that's probably not the most helpful thing. I know I've in my own marriage dealt with that, where it's like, I just wanted to resolve whatever's going on, where really I could have just listened more,
Mm.
or allow the tears to just flow more, and just let time work its course, because oftentimes that's what um, is in the situation of a loss or a miscarriage. And certainly, like, there just needs to be time to heal. And so I think a husband can help by listening and just being supportive in that regard, but most importantly, praying for his
Yeah.
wife.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What are some of the attributes of God that you would counsel a couple facing miscarriage to focus on?
Yeah, I would think first that, and I mentioned it earlier, it's just God's providence. And so wrapped up in that is his omniscience, his omnipotence, his omnipresence, that he knows all, he is all powerful, he is in all places, all times. And so that's the first. So knowing that this hasn't happened outside of the ordering of a sovereign God.
Yeah.
That's the first I think of. The second I would think of is God's love. I think of in that is the clearest picture of that's his grace towards us in Christ. And the verse comes to mind where he says, "He who did not spare his own son, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things?" And the example is he did not spare his son. Like he gave his very son that we might be counted righteous. And so certainly in this suffering, this time, like, he will supply what is needful for us. And then secondly, just his goodness, his kindness, just remembering that he is a good and perfect, kind God, a loving Father to us. And even in the darkest of times, that is true, that he is good and he does good.
Yeah.
And he does not do wrong. He does not do evil. And so those would be some of the attributes I think of.
I think that's wonderful. When we return, we're going to talk about some misunderstandings in miscarriage and how we can uniquely minister to those around us that are suffering a miscarriage.
If you have a desire to encourage the hurting with the hope of Jesus, we invite you to join our ministry by giving a donation at hopeinthemourning.org. Episodes like the one you're listening to are only made possible by your donations. Now, if you've lost a loved one, you can donate in their honor. Simply put their name in the memo portion of your donation, and we'll read these names on future episodes of Hope in the Mourning. And may you be reminded of the goodness and faithfulness of God as you continue this episode of Hope in the Mourning. Do you have a testimony of hope? Perhaps you've walked through depression or addiction. Maybe you were diagnosed with a serious illness or have suffered the life-altering death of a loved one. If you want to encourage others with your testimony and share the light of Jesus, visit hopeinthemourning.org and submit your story. Your story might be just what someone else needs to hear to find hope in their mourning. Are you in a season of seemingly endless sorrow? Is your heart longing for encouragement? Join us on Hope in the Mourning to hear powerful testimonies of how God is a light even in our darkest valley. We'd also love to pray for you. Simply submit your prayer request at hopeinthemourning.org.
This is a poem that I wrote after my most recent miscarriage, and it's called In His Keeping. I have a secret sorrow deep within my soul, for I have loved a little one that no one else will ever know. I was the only home that ever held your frame, as you were woven in the secret place, and only Jesus knew your name. Though never held against my chest while I hummed a lullaby, I offered countless prayers for you in the stillness of the night. My heart will always wonder why your heart could not keep beating, and it will always bring a sober thought that each precious life is fleeting. So with open hands that longed for you, I'll praise them through my weeping, and in my sorrow offer praise, for you are in His keeping. What are some common misunderstandings in miscarriage?
Yeah, I think that the two most common things that come up will be first, a mom will often ask, "Is there anything I did to cause the miscarriage?" And outside of extreme circumstances like drug abuse or something, then the vast majority of miscarriages are nothing that a mom did to cause that. That comes up very regularly as a question. The second would be what could we have done to prevent it? And unfortunately, in the vast majority of those pregnancies as well, there's not anything you can intervene to prevent that loss. And so those are probably the two biggest misconceptions I see. Did I cause it? And then what could we have done to prevent that?
Yeah.
Which is, it's hard. It's like you go back to wanting to fix something. You want to be able to intervene to do something. And
so, I mean, I think it's almost like a two-sided coin, because it's like on the one hand, like you're saying, you want there to be some sort of answer of like, how could I fix this? How could I prevent this from happening in the future? But on the other hand, there's a comfort in knowing that like you likely didn't do anything that caused it. And, even, you hear the statistics now that are pretty prevalent around that miscarriages happen to 1 in 4. And that's what a lot of people say. I think prior to the last couple of years where miscarriage became more of a topic that was openly discussed, a lot of people didn't realize how common miscarriages are.
Yeah. And I think to that point, often people ask me, it seems like a very common question in practice is someone says, was it okay to tell my family or my friends? And I usually err on the side of you should probably tell someone as soon as you find out you're pregnant. So because, it's just different for everybody. And I would answer that question in a general sense to guide. But I do think it's important, especially from a Christian perspective, that people in your life know, and so that however the pregnancy, whatever happens to the pregnancy, there's people who can love on you and speak into your life the word of God and to pray for you. And so I usually err on the side of saying maybe you should tell people sooner than later. For that reason.
I think that's really good advice, because I think, whether it's going through a healthy first trimester, which is rough for a lot of women, just with nausea and exhaustion and maybe balancing other children and other household tasks as well. Or if you lose a baby during that time, you need that support system. And, along with that, I would ask you, what are some ways that you have maybe witnessed people uniquely minister to in tangible ways to people who have gone through miscarriage?
I think within the church that there's always the church seems to serve families well, whether it's, you see it most frequently when someone's had a baby, they come around and provide meals, but on the other end, it's like people, it's a sweet way to serve a family, bringing them a meal, but it allows you to have an interaction with them or pray for them or to speak to them. But that's probably one of the most tangible ways I see a church serve a family. And just in observing people, just give someone a hug, and let them know you're praying for them, and to give that encouragement. Those are just practical, tangible things I see
Yeah.
people do.
I
within the
think
body.
that's great. And again, as someone that's gone through miscarriage, I'll throw in there, like, if they did name the baby, saying their name, I think is a helpful thing, because it gives validation to the fact that that was a life, and even, I know not everybody names their miscarried babies. My husband and I chose to name all of ours. And part of that was because we felt like that gave validity and dignity to their life, no matter how long it was. We've had miscarriages that ranged from 7 weeks to 12 and a half weeks. And, for us, that almost puts a little bit of I don't want to say closure, but it kind of gives, like, okay, there's a comfort in that, especially as a mom. I found a comfort in that. And so, as with any loss, I would say don't hesitate to say their name, whether they're a husband or a wife or a child that was 6 when they passed away, or someone that was unborn. I think that that's important in those instances. What are some ways that you have seen husbands grieve that maybe people aren't aware of?
Yeah, I think that, in the unique position that the Lord allows me to be in people's life, and you alluded to this earlier by saying the joy or that of an expected pregnancy. That's what people were generally coming in to the office on the day when they find out they're having a miscarriage, is they're expecting to see a heartbeat, and they're expecting to see something there. And so the high of that compared to the low of that moment in time, it's a great gulf. I mean, it's vast. And so I think that to see, you see husbands weep, and you see them mourn and grieve, and I think that's what I see them most. And people were very most of the time unguarded in that situation, and also just it really does add to the truth that whether that we hold to as Christians, which you talk about, like, that every pregnancy, every human being in the womb is an image bearer, and we believe that and hold to that. But the world would say it doesn't. But in reality, when they face a miscarriage, you see that, oh, they did hold. You do actually believe deep down that every life in the womb is a child. And so you see that becomes starkly clear when someone's encountered with that.
I think that's a really interesting perspective that you just said, because deep down, even A Mere Christianity, C.S. Lewis, he talks about how we have this intrinsic knowledge within us of who we are in Christ. And we suppress that truth and unrighteousness, as Scripture says. But at the core, we know that we are created in God's image, and that every baby, every human being is a unique and one of a kind human being, never to happen again. And so in that sense, I would also love to transition to the fact that what's considered a rainbow baby. Can you explain what a rainbow baby is?
If I'm right, it's the child after a miscarriage. Right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. They call it that because they say, the miscarriage is like a time of storm. And then you have this rainbow that comes after the storm. But I think there's also a misunderstanding that once you have a rainbow baby, the pain of your miscarriage goes away, that you forget about that, because now you have this joyful thing, which is true. What has been your experience with that, with people having pregnancies after?
I think that certainly there's a joy in the success of a pregnancy that is new, but generally there's always it's like you would say that it's a loss of a child has occurred in someone's life, and they would always hold to that. I think that there's that when brought to remembrance, there's a sadness that comes back even in a new pregnancy. And I think that's a natural response to, what ultimately you see in a miscarriage and pregnancy loss. And I'm sure you've talked about on your shows before that this is the effects of the fall.
Yeah.
So sin has affected everything on earth, and so when we experience that, we're seeing the effect of sin upon the earth, and the appropriate response is to mourn and to grieve, and to for the Christian to set our minds towards heaven. I was thinking about just as in Isaiah 65, when talking about the new heavens and the new earth, the verse that says, "No more shall there be in it an infant who lives but a few days, or an old man who does not fill out his days." So that there is a day coming where all wrongs will be made right, and even in Revelation, where there's no more mourning, there's no more tears, there's suffering, and all things are made new in its final state. And so it makes us ultimately, as Christians, look towards heaven, and may we live heavenly minded is ultimately.
Yeah, I love that. I think that when you have had a loss as well, and you go on to have another pregnancy, there are fears that you have to combat. It's going to make me cry now, because there's a fear that comes in every time that you go for an ultrasound. You're waiting for there not to be a heartbeat because you've experienced that. But it gives us an opportunity to lay it before the Lord and say, "Lord, this is not, I didn't bring this life to be. It's in the Lord's hands." And it can be so hard to hold our hands openly before the Lord and say, it's not my will, but your will. And so with that, if we keep a heavenly perspective, and we know that the pains that we experience in this world are passing, but the Lord is near to the brokenhearted. The Lord sees our tears. The Lord cares about those things. The Lord cared about those lives. He's not indifferent. And I think that that's so important. And, not only do I want to thank you for coming on today, but thank you for the care that you have shown Brent and I in our seasons. And, we're praying for your ministry as well, because I truly believe that's what it is. I think that as a believer, that you're walking alongside people. What a wonderful way that you can show the love of the Lord to people, whether it's on their greatest day or when their faith is being tested. So
thank you for having me.
I really appreciate it. So, all right, well, join us next week on Hope in the Mourning.
Hope in the Mourning is a nonprofit ministry that seeks to encourage the hurting, equip those who walk beside them, and evangelize the lost with the hope of Jesus Christ. To partner with our ministry or to make a donation in your loved one's honor, please visit hopeinthemorning.org. Your donation helps keep these stories of hope on the air and helps tangibly meet the needs of the hurting.